Hey everyone, and welcome to Three Black Women and Their White Coach,
a podcast where we have a conversation around navigating race in the coaching industry.
And we're your hosts.
I'm Catrice Stetson, your mixed race internet bestie and serial entrepreneur who's built multiple businesses from the ground up.
And I'm Brianna Lachelle, your biracial nonprofit coach whose focus is on helping support nonprofit leaders and founders create impact-driven organizations that radically change their communities for the better.
Here at Three Black Women and Their White Coach, we dive into hard conversations centered around racial inequity within the coaching space with softness and grace.
Our hearts are to open up these conversations and create a safe space for people to be seen, learn, and create a better, more inclusive environment for all.
So pull up a chair, your favorite snack, and a bevy while you yap with your new biz besties as we work to make the coaching industry a place where we all feel welcome and respected.
In this episode, we're shifting from calling out harm to calling in vision. We're talking about the role of mentorship for Black women in coaching, what's missing, what we wish existed, and why representation alone isn't enough. We'll unpack the difference between mentorship and ministry, share our personal experiences with mentorship, both beautiful and painful, and talk about how to build the kind of support that makes room for wholeness, leadership, and legacy.
This episode is rooted in hope and truth. As we talk about the role of mentorship for Black women in coaching, we want to make one thing clear. This isn't about exclusion, it's about expansion. We're not saying mentorship from white coaches can't be valuable. We're saying that mentorship must include the cultural awareness, lived experience, and space for us to show up whole. We're sharing what we've needed, what we've missed, and what we're dreaming of, because we believe in creating more support, not less. If you've ever wondered how to be a better mentor, a better listener, or even just a better ally, this conversation is for you. We're not just talking about what's missing, we're building what's next.
So let's define mentorship. First, I'm going to tell you what it's not. So mentorship is not just giving advice to someone. It's not copy and paste coaching, doing the same thing for each person over and over. It's not be like me energy. It's not asking someone to replicate you, and that means they'll have success. And it's not a power imbalance.
What is mentorship? Mentorship is shared wisdom, mutual respect, safe reflection, and it's truly guidance that holds space for identity, leadership style, and lived experience.
Yeah. And so I think it's also important to talk about what's the difference between mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching. And so coaching focuses on performance. You're there to help someone meet a goal. Sponsorship is about opening doors. It's about bringing people into rooms that you're in that they might not have access to without your support. And then mentorship walks with someone. It's doing life with someone. It's like being right beside them instead of being right beside them and helping them through something versus being like at the finish line and yelling at them to keep going.
I just saw like a full visual because I used to run track. And so like I full like my brain split second full visual like finish line, like keep going.
Don't stop.
Run faster.
Literally, yes. And I think they're all valuable and they all have a place, but we have to be really clear about like what it means to be a mentor for someone versus what it means to be a coach for someone versus what it means to be like someone's counselor. Like those are all very different things, and sometimes they can get all meshed together and it causes like unmet expectations because we're not really clear about what we're getting or what we're asking for.
Yeah, and I think that there's also such a blend, and I kind of talked about this an episode or two ago, where in the online space right now, there's coaches, mentors, strategists, and consultants.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone does things pretty similar, but also different. For instance, when I think of a coach, I think of more so leading someone to an answer. Like they're going to ask questions, and it's you doing, like you as the client doing way more of the work to try to be like, okay, like where do I actually sit with this? And then there's like a strategist who is going to, one, ask you questions to get an idea of what's worked, what's not, but then is also going to provide you with like, this is the framework, and then how do we implement you into it?
Right.
And then we just defined what a mentor looks like. It's really that coming up alongside you. For me personally, I view mentorship most often as unpaid.
Mm.
Usually when I'm like, oh, I want a mentor, I'm really looking at someone who I'm going to go and have like a chat with, like a coffee chat with. And then I'm going to go and pay like a coach. I'm going to go pay a strategist. And then there's consultant, and consultant to me very much looks like they're just going to tell you the answer that you're looking for. You're going to come here and be like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. How do I do it? They're going to be like, here is how you do that. In this conversation, we're not saying that these things can't blend, but I think it's really setting the tone and the expectation of what are people, not just Black women, but everyone getting out of something.
Yeah.
Like what is the role of mentorship for Black women and Black women in the coaching industry and space? But also, how can we make sure that as coaches, we are creating offers where in our marketing and sales, we are clearly outlining the expectations and deliverables and what can be expected of the space,
Yeah.
but also as clients being able to look and how do we evaluate, you know, a space, and how do we make sure that we are getting everything that we are looking for.
Yeah, definitely. I think like now could be a really good time for us to talk about the gap that there is so that way we
Yes.
can like dive more into personal stories of where this has happened. So the first thing is that if we're being really honest, there's very not very, but there's few Black women in leadership or visible positions in the coaching communities. Like off the top of my head, I can think of maybe five Black coaches that are like really big, really prominent that I see really often. Granted, I'm not in the entire coaching space, like within my niche, within like niches that I follow pretty closely. Like I can think of maybe five in comparison to like the hundreds of really successful coaches, especially when you start talking about coaches who are making 6 7 figures that are like really leading the charge of the coaching industry. You don't see a lot of Black women represented there. And so that comes with like this burden of being the first, being the only. And we've talked a lot about that when it comes to like being the only one in a room in a coaching space, but then even more so being like the only woman of color that's being like really successful and is like really prominent in the space.
Yeah.
And then having just like the fact that there's coaches who don't understand and reflect like cultural experiences, and that's not because they don't want to, but because they're not a part of that culture, right? So there's this gap of that when clients and people are looking for coaching opportunities are having to make almost like compromises for some things because there's just not a space for them that perfectly fits. And even when there is, sometimes it demands like assimilation instead of authenticity.
Yeah.
And so, like, if, for example, you do find someone who's willing to be your mentor in a space or your coach in the space, depending on the relationship, and they don't look like you, then a lot of the time that client is having to like try to fit a mold to work with that person or to connect with that person instead of like showing up as their full self, which within itself can cause problems. And then there's like also we've talked a lot about this in another episode about like programs that tokenize the Black women or the women of color in the room, but they don't actually empower them. And so there's this huge gap of where there's a lot of Black women or women of color who's trying to find a space within the industry, but there's this gap because there isn't people who look like them, and there's not a consciousness of what it is to be a person of color or a Black woman and what that means to how you function within that space. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and even like that first point you were talking about few Black women in leadership or visible positions, like, and you were talking about, oh, like I can only name maybe like five. I also think that says so much about and we know that there are more out there. That's the thing. But
Totally.
like, they're not the ones getting pushed. They're not the ones, with mega virality where we all know who Alex Earl is.
Yeah.
But looking at like and she's not a coach, but looking at creators in general in the
Yeah.
online space, how many of them can you name that are of color versus those who aren't? And I think it's such an interesting topic because sometimes I get pushback when I do talk about like how little there is, and they're like, "Oh, well, then you're not just in the right spaces or your algorithm." And I'm like, "But like it's not just a me thing. There are so
Yeah.
many other women of color who even when I'm actively seeking to hire a new coach or I'm actively seeking to hire providers to my team because I do have a done for you agency, I find that women of color in general aren't the ones who end up, submitting applications or that I end up finding. Even when I'm actively looking, it's like if we look at Google and use this as an example, like if you are on Google and you're looking for something, sometimes you have to click 4 or 5 pages back to find the thing that you're really looking for. And that's
Yeah.
what sometimes feels like for me when I'm looking for women of color to hire in any capacity. It
Yeah.
feels like I have to hunt for it. Like I have to really do a search where, I mean, there are so many white creators, white coaches, white service providers. There's an abundance.
I think this is where like sponsorship can really play a huge role for white women who are wanting to be allies, is that there's a lack of women in these higher spaces like turning around and holding their hand out and bringing up women of color to be in the same spaces and like actually have true power and true authority or true like connection, And so I think that makes it really hard because there are a ton of highly qualified, highly educated providers, coaches, clients that are not getting the same support and attention because of their color. And even though no one will ever say that that's why like if we're just going to be really honest. And so it's really hard. And then there's this, it's like a cycle, right? Like, okay, there's no one in the space, so like people will hire non-people of color because they can't find anyone, and then it like perpetuates like, oh well, there's nobody in the space, or oh, they're not in this room, they didn't get the visibility, and so then it cycles again and again and again, and there's no room for new creators, especially like women of color or black women, to have the opportunity because nobody's passing out that opportunity. And a lot of times, and this isn't everyone or always, but like it's a problem enough that like if you're being really honest listening right now, like how many women of color or black women are you following that has the same level of success as like the most successful white creator or white coach that
Yeah.
like, being honest. And I mean, if you know a lot, like drop them in some comments so we can go and follow them. But like personally, I haven't seen a lot of that, even when like you were saying, Catrice, like I'm searching or looking. And I think that that's a problem because it causes like this disconnect.
Yeah. And I think that even when, a woman of color makes it to the top, I remember having this conversation when we first met because our coach at the time highlighted that there was this black coach who was bashing, I don't even know how to word it, because the way that she went about it was so bonkers crazy. But there's this black coach and she, was claiming to have made well over 6 figures. I can't remember exactly if she said 7 figures or not, but was definitely over 6 figures. And she was talking about, oh, like if you're poor or you don't make X amount of money, then like I don't want to work with you. And I think that that's also something that being a woman of color in the space and other women of color struggle with, is that sometimes when women of color do make it to the top, there isn't that turn and like help lift others up.
Mm-hmm.
You get sharky
Yeah.
and you get mean and you're trying to assimilate and you're trying to blend in with everyone else who's at the top, that you shut out so many other women from being able to, help them get to where you're at,
Yeah.
because we all want to get paid, we all want to make money, but we all start at different places. The
Yeah.
starting our starting line is not the same spot as someone who is white. And then you add all these other factors in, and, there's already so much that you can see in like corporate America between, the pay difference between a man and a woman, but there's also pay differences between races.
Yeah.
And that carries over as much as we want to, ditch the 9 to 5 and, you know, have control over our lives and financial and time freedom and everything. Like, we all do, to a certain degree, still subscribe to some form of mainstream capitalism,
Yeah.
and that is what corporate America is.
Yeah.
And I see it most in the online space in terms of pay and the starting place, and where, what you're willing to pay a white coach versus what you're willing to pay a black coach, and the price point. And, obviously there are different prerequisites for joining different programs. Like, there are programs that are made and established for female founders who are making over 6 figures, because they're
Yeah.
trying to level up to the 7 figure mark and those types of things. And you have to be making X amount of dollars. But this particular coach that I'm talking about was basically just all clientele, period. If
Mm.
you weren't making X amount of dollars, and it was like high 4 figures, potentially 5 figures, then you were considered poor. She talked about poverty, talked about, I'm not your mom, I'm not going to baby you, and basically kind of pushed this idea of, if you are poor or if you can't afford X, Y, and Z, then you are incompetent. And that just, like, when women of color are looking to the top and that is what they're seeing, it perpetuates this idea that we will never get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also like, what is the price of fame and money? Like, that
Yeah.
we, oh, if I make it this far. That's another thing, is dealing with this mindset, this scarcity around, and this fear of, if I become successful, then I, like, will have to sell some piece of my soul.
Yeah. That's a huge like concern that so many people like that I've had to face, that a lot of people I know has had to face. And it's hard because you do see things like that, right? You see people who you used to look up to that go and turn around and like kind of bash on where they started, and that can become really hard. So it's not just like a white coach problem. I think it's like a success problem, and the aspect
Mhm.
that like as you get successful, especially as women, we should be turning around, looking back and like holding our hand out versus like thinking of it as like there's only limited pieces of pie. Like one of my favorite analogies is that like success is not a pie with limited pieces, it's an ocean with endless depths.
Ooh, that is good. I've never heard that.
Yeah. And it's like it's like you have the ability, everybody has the ability to be successful, but when we look at each other as competition instead of like peers and like community, then we start losing pieces of ourselves and we start playing into this idea that we're better than other people when, you know, everybody's gonna be born and everybody's gonna die. Like, and it doesn't matter how much money you make in the middle, you can't take it with you. So I think it's just so much better to support one another, and it creates this community that like coaching and mentorship is really about. Because like, yeah, we all want the bag, but we also want better spaces than corporate America. You know, like when I think about corporate America, I think about stiff, icky, like not no flexibility, rigidity, and like the aspect that like there's not community there. It's like you show up, you do your work, and you go home. Where the coaching industry has really given us an opportunity to create community and create spaces that like matter, and where like we
Yeah.
feel known and seen. And so if we want to maintain that like feeling in like such a special place, we have to like do the work to do that.
Yeah. No, and I even like the way that you phrased that last part about, if we want this space, we have to do the work. And I even think of the analogy of like a garden. Like, you don't
Mhm.
just wake up one day and are like, oh, I want a garden and I want it to be full of flowers and fruits and vegetables. And like, you sit on it.
Yeah.
And this is like one of those things where when Brianna and I were first having these conversations where we were like, whoa, we are on this retreat and some shitty shit is being said, some shitty, not even shitty, some shady shit is happening. Like, what do we do? And then, not just in that moment, but as we sat and reflected, because, I think that so often sometimes when we're talking about present problems, we actually do a lot of reflection into what led to this moment.
Hmm.
And as we started peeling back those layers of like, yes, we were on the retreat from hell, but like, what happened? Like, how did we get here? How did the space get here? And then it became this, because I'm gonna be so real. We were joking around about a tell-all. We were joking around about a tell-all book. And then that tell-all book became this podcast. And it wasn't, oh, we were like, oh, we're not going to do a tell-all book, we're going to do a tell-all podcast, but it became, how can we actually, you know, take lemons and make lemonade? How
Yeah.
can we take these really terrible, harmful, traumatic, hurtful experiences, and how do we actually create the space? We have the ability to create community and
Yeah.
create coaching programs and all the stuff. And so that's where like we like what brought us here today is like, how do we actually do the work? Because
Yeah.
we can talk all night up till 5 a.m. about how crummy it is, and that there is a time and a place to just kind of shoot the shit and like be real about, this is sucky, this sucks. And I do think that there's a time and a place for complaining, but it's, what are you going to do after that? When
Yeah.
you get it all off your chest, what are you doing after that? And it's starting to have honest conversations about, where are we at and how do we make it better? And that's where this
Yeah.
podcast came into, is like, how do we start having those honest conversations about the burnout that we're feeling, about the boundaries that we have lacked, and how do we set them, and how do we really create a space to talk about the support that's needed?
Yeah.
Because so often it's truly it just takes someone, in terms of success, it just takes someone turning around and saying, here, let me help you up too.
Yeah. Yeah. And recognizing that that doesn't hurt anyone, and that ultimately having a more diverse group of successful women mentoring and coaching other diverse women makes everyone better, because we get to see new perspectives. We get to experience things and like lenses that we normally wouldn't. Like, I think there is value of being a Black woman sitting under the leadership of a white coach. One of my like most favorite women and one of my coaches for life is a white woman, and I honor and value her leadership and how she speaks into me and my life and how she coaches me through like different seasons and my business. Like, I get so much value out of that. I think there's also so much value in Black women leading white women and other women of color, and like the things that you can gain from people who don't look like you, no matter what your race or ethnicity is huge. But if we're not intentional with creating those times and those spaces, and if we're not intentional with making sure that there's a place for everyone regardless of what they look like, and like being sensitive to where they're coming from and like what they're holding, if we're not doing those things, then everyone's kind of missing out. And so we have to start being so intentional and just like taking the time to do the work to create these spaces, because there's women out there who want the space. They want to be able to coach and learn and lead and mentor, but when they're not given the opportunity, or when the spaces they're in isn't safe for them, we miss out on so many gems because it's just not there. It's not a possibility for them.
Yeah, and I think it's just really taking, really being able to take as a white coach when you're looking at your women of color in your programs and really seeing like, yes, it's amazing when you have a diverse group, but how do you use your privilege? And even anyone, you don't just have to be white because there are privileges you get at all different aspects of life, but like how do you use your privilege to help others like build the movements, to make the change, to have the success, to
Yeah.
bring everyone to the top? Because, a thought that I had is in this note of we all have different privileges. Like, I am not a mom right now. I have the privilege of having a partner who works a 9 to 5, so I am able to get access to insurance and everything, and is so flexible with my flexible schedule that I then am able to adapt my programs
Mm,
to my clients. And it's that, who are moms who work 9 to 5s. I'm not someone who pushes people out of 9 to 5s. I'm not a big fan of that. But it's also creating space for. I had a conversation recently with someone about, everyone wants to push this idea of leaving your 9 to 5, but no one wants to offer a 5 p.m. coaching call,
mm,
you know? And so then it's like, how are you supposed to help people get out of their 9 to 5s if you don't provide them the actual space to do that? And without question, when someone says, I work a 9 to 5, like, this is when I'm free, or I'm a mom and this is when my kids are at school. Like, how do you adapt without needing an explanation and needing someone to explain why they need something, but being able to hear it and really being like, this is who they are, this is
yeah.
where they're at, and this is how I'm going to support them.
Yeah.
Like being able to really meet people where they're at, because that isn't just for men, like, and we went over all the different titles and things that are given, but it's not just for mentors. Like, that's you as a coach, you as a strategist, you as a consultant, you as a sponsor. Like, how do you meet people where they're at and walk alongside them so then we
Yeah.
all can get to the top?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also important for us to know that, like, historically, like, the Black community isn't big on, like, therapy or therapy adjacent things, which coaching really falls into that.
Amen.
As Black women, we have to be open enough to receive mentorship and coaching, and understanding the value, and understanding that that doesn't mean that you're not capable, that you're not intelligent, that you're not smart, that you couldn't figure it out. But like understanding that, like, when we find the right spaces, coaching can be so transformative in giving you a space to find community, in giving you tools and frameworks and perspectives that you're not familiar with that can help you be more successful. And that there's no like shame in investing in ourselves in those ways that traditionally our community has kind of like frowned upon, or it's been kind of taboo. And I think that can also play a part in why we don't see as many Black women specifically in very high standards, because there is the taboo that we kind of have to get over. And I mean, luckily, with like millennials and Gen Zers, we're much more open to therapy. We're open to new ways of doing things that maybe our parents and grandparents either like totally denied or didn't have access to. But it's still like a strong thing that impacts our community, that we also have to take some responsibility of being like, am I not finding mentorship because there's no one out there to mentor me? Or am I not finding mentorship because I'm not willing to be mentored?
Ooh, that is the question.
And I'm just saying, like, we have to be open. Like, if we're, especially like speaking directly to Black women and women of color right now, if we want white women to create spaces for us where we can belong, we have to be open to accepting their leadership and authority, as long as they're doing it in healthy ways. But we can't ask them to create spaces for us and then not actually walk into those spaces that they're actively trying to create. And we
Yeah.
have to have the perspective that like they're not going to get it perfect, and we have to be willing to come in and partner with them and and hold them accountable and then be held accountable. And it's a back and forth relationship that everybody's going to fail at sometimes, and sometimes it's going to work out good, but we have to be willing to put forth as much effort as they are, or it's never going to work.
Amen. A fucking men. That was so solid. No, and like, God bless my mother. Like, put all of us kids all together. We did family therapy. We've been doing it for the last, I don't know, 5 years potentially, maybe longer.
Amen.
And like the having those conversations with my dad who's not willing to do it, like it
Mhm.
truly is, there is a stigma around getting help, especially when it is for something that is not tangible
Right.
in terms of mental health, whether it is the mental and emotional weight of running your own company
Mhm.
or the mental health, keeping it up in terms of like burnout and also working through trauma and that stuff. I mean, what you said, Brandon, just like resonates so hard because there is this level of skepticism and questioning that comes with, is this actually going to help me? Is this actually going to be worth it? And I see this with my dad all the time when we talk about therapy. Like, fun fact, my parents are divorced now. They divorced in December of, well, it became official in December of 2024. And one of the things that my mom said, because she's the one who divorced my dad, my mom was like, and as she's opened up to me about it and my siblings, is she wanted to go to couples counseling, but my dad was
Mhm.
unwilling because why should someone else, like, who is someone else to be able to say anything about their relationship or them as people?
Yeah.
But I can attest to the reality and the amazingness that is seeking support, whether it is therapy, coaching, whatever. When
Yeah.
you have someone who can help you on an emotional, a strategic, or even a spiritual level, like
Yeah.
it's so big and it creates space for you to really explore who are you and
Yeah.
where do you really want to go, not just unpacking what's happened, because I think that's also something that gets, especially in the Black community, it's, trying to fix something and
Mhm.
looking at, oh, I did X, Y, and Z bad, but not turning the other direction and going, where do I want to go and who do I want to be?
Yeah.
And mentorship helps with that. Joining coaching programs helps with that. I mean, entrepreneurship in general is, we're not just growing businesses, we're becoming better people. Like, let's be real. It is a
Yeah.
personal growth journey to be a founder, especially a female founder. And
Yeah.
on top of that, a woman of color who is
Yeah.
a founder. And really taking hold of the fact that, you know, when you do seek help, it's not a bad thing. It's that you're making room for the person you're going to become.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also important for us to recognize, like, if you're a white coach listening to this right now and you want to implement like some mentorship for Black women or women of color, I think that's beautiful. I think it's also important for us to recognize our limits as coach, our limits as, like, if you're a white person, like, you're not going to be able to support people effectively with like certain traumas or situations that you will never experience, and that there's no shame in like lovingly referring your clients to spaces that can support them in that area, right? That doesn't mean that they should stop coaching with you for like other things, but like if you're not a therapist, don't provide therapy services to your clients. Tell them they need to see a
Amen.
therapist. If you are not a Black person, do not speak on Black experiences and Black issues that you have no like true knowledge about. Refer them to a Black person who can help walk that out with them in some type of mentorship or therapeutic capacity, because that's one, it's not ethical if you don't do that, and two, it's so supportive and so freeing, because I think as coaches sometimes we think that we have to show up and be like everything to our clients, and this is where like boundaries play such a huge role. Like you have to understand like what you can do and what you can do and what was it within your wheelhouse to provide someone, and then lovingly redirect them, because that's kind. It's kind to know your limitations and to not cross those boundaries, because then you don't end up hurt or you don't end up hurting someone else. And so I think it's beautiful and so honorable to tell your clients like, hey, I see this is something that you're really struggling with, and I honor that because this is a really hard thing. I know I am not the right person that can provide you the support that you need. Here are some resources that I know. Here are some things that I could suggest. And I still really want to help you with this thing that we've been talking about or that we've been working on. But for this other thing, I really suggest that you do this because I don't want to cause you more harm by trying to muddle through it with you, and actually it ends up hurting you. You know, like there's so much honor and integrity in that. And I respect coaches so much more when they're able to just shoot it straight. You know, like if you can't help me with something, just tell me. I tell my clients all the time, anytime I have an inquiry call of somebody who's even thinking about working with me, I tell them, let's talk about your situation. And at the end, I'm going to tell you if I can help you, and if I can't, I'm going to tell you straight up, because I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to cause you harm. And if I know somebody who can help you, I'll send you their way. But I'm never going to tell you that I can do something that I can't. If your situation is something out of my wheelhouse, I won't do it. And I think that that's the integrity that we need, that we all need to be bringing into the space, and putting down like our Superman capes, because it's causing more harm than actually helping. And it's leaving us as coaches feeling bad. It feels bad when we tell someone that we can do something and then we fail, you know?
Yeah. And I think also another layer to that is the fear that you're going to miss out on money.
Ugh,
And like it's okay to admit that you are not well versed in something and that there is someone better suited to support them. And
yeah.
I think that something that you have to remember, I truly believe in the idea of karma and that the universe gives and takes. And based off of what you are willing to give, you will also receive back.
Yeah.
And if you, I think that this is also something to really think on if you are a coach in any capacity or a service provider in any capacity. But could your business be better if you actually took off the Superman cape and started referring people out to people who are actually specialists?
Mm-hmm.
And would those people potentially turn around and support your business?
Yeah.
You know, like it can truly be an exchange, it can be a give and a take.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's also something that I see in the space that holds so many people back, is because we as coaches sometimes get into this like we have to be everything, we have to do everything. And when you can admit that you are not God,
Mm-hmm.
you are not Superman, things get so much better for
Yeah.
you and for your clients.
Yeah. Catrice, you do such a good job of doing that. If you guys want a good example of someone who refers out, like anytime I'm on thread, somebody's asking for something and Catrice slides up into the comments. It's like, oh, so-and-so could do this and so-and-so is great as this. And I think that it's like so beneficial because one, it shows your character as a person. And like it personally, it always every time I see it, I'm like, man, Catrice is the first person that I'm going to go to if I need XYZ help. And she's the first person I'm going to ask because I know she's going to give me like an expert and not just try to make money off of me if she's not the right person. And I think that, yeah, I'm just saying, I just want to give you your flowers on that. I think also what applies to this is that all money ain't good money. And that is like that is a motto
Amen.
to live by. All money ain't good money. And if you have to do bad things or things that just feel a little bit unethical or make you feel a little bit gross, it's gonna cost you. It might not cost you up front, but it's gonna cost you in the end. And it's gonna cost, whether that's to your like reputation, to how people speak about you, to how people think about you, to how you feel about yourself, to your own struggles that inevitably come up because you agreed to something that you shouldn't have. There's always a consequence to our action. And so when we're honest and we're just like really transparent of what is and what isn't, it makes it easier on everyone in the long run.
Yeah. Okay, I would love to kind of dive into some specific, just some good action step bullet points of how do we create these spaces that we have kind of built up and talked about. And there are things that for our Black women who are listening that they can do, and also for the white coaches as well. But for the Black women, I think a really great place to start is starting small,
Yeah.
truly starting small. And this could be one, starting with one-on-one access, whether that's you offering as a coach or you as a client. I think sometimes starting in a one-on-one capacity where you don't have to worry about others
Mm-hmm.
and their viewpoints, especially if you are kind of unpacking and relearning and unlearning how to get help.
Yeah.
One-on-one is great. And then also when you're a coach, like really looking at, who were you before? Like, what is a couple steps behind you that you can turn around and lift up? Like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, like you need to take them to catastrophic numbers of like seven figures, but like, how do you just get them a little bit closer to where you're at?
Yeah.
And then really looking at building community versus hierarchy, kind of like the example I was talking about earlier, where this coach, this Black woman who's a coach, is very much at the top. She's someone that, if she didn't post what she posted and didn't have the views and on life that she does and other people, she's someone that I would turn to because she's where I want to be in terms of financial success. But
Yeah.
there's a hierarchy. How do we actually build community where not everyone has to be at the same level, but everyone is seen and valued for who they are and where they're at?
Yeah.
And then you can share knowledge even when you're still figuring it out. I think that sometimes everyone can sometimes get in their head about, oh, like I'm still like, who am I? That imposter syndrome. Who am I to be able to coach, to mentor, to be able to support? And you can do this at any point in the game, whether you are still very much a client in coaching programs or you have been coaching for a while. We get into this imposter syndrome of who am I? Even if you're on a coaching program and you're a client and it's a group program, and someone says something or has a question and you have a coach who leaves space for others to answer, that's something that is really big in my programs. I know a lot about Instagram marketing and sales and about how to build a business, but I also very much honor the fact that the other women in my programs are also business owners and have tried and true like experiences and frameworks, and leaving that space, like you have something to share and to contribute. And then also looking at safety and how do we create safety rather than seeking out perfection of others? How do we create a space where us as women of color can come together and really sit in, wow, it is sometimes hard to be a woman of color, but also, wow, how amazing is it to be able to be in this space and to do what we do without
Yeah.
expecting everyone to fit a certain framework of what you believe the perfect Black coach or the perfect Black client looks like.
Yeah, totally. And for our white coaches who are listening, some things that we can do to build these spaces is when you're not the mentor, help make space for one who is. So if you know that you're not the person like we were talking about earlier, and you know the person, then refer them to the person that you know, but also just being honest and transparent to know what role you should be playing and what space you can take up and what capacity, and just being really honest with yourself and with your clients so that way everybody is safe and honored. Another thing that you can do is be sharing your platform without expecting praise. That we're doing things not for the likes or the pat on the back, but because we actually want to do the things that we're doing, that we actually want to bring people into our platform to help support people who look like us and who don't. And that it's not like a PR gimmick. Like I've said over and over, like, don't fake the funk, like if you don't want to be in a space that is inclusive and diverse, don't pretend, like just be real. And if you do, don't expect like a gold star for that, because I mean, it's just being a good person. And when you're a good person, like Catrice was saying, like karma always comes back around, but we're not doing things for the praise of it or for like the pats on the back of it. We're doing it because we think it's the right thing to do. And that heart posture matters, because if we are doing something for the wrong reasons, then it like creates resentment and it creates hard feelings that then creates even more problems that we're trying to solve. So if you really don't want to do it, then just don't. Like, I think it's better to do nothing than to do something with ill intentions. Also, you can be sponsoring Black women into the rooms that you have access to. Let's be honest, Black women are statistically the most educated group of people in the United States. Like Black women, there are very capable, smart, intelligent Black women. And so the ones that who are doing really good jobs at whatever it is that their craft or profession is, invite them into rooms that you're already in that they would never have access to if you didn't hold their hand and bring them with you. Because again, one, it's the right thing to do. Two, it creates relationship and community that makes the industry better. And three, it creates this like give and take, like Catrice was saying, that the next time that there's an opportunity that you're a good fit for, that Black woman's going to think of you. And then also, just like finally, with everything, I think it's really important for us to check our egos, especially when the methods that we provide don't land. As we've talked about multiple times throughout our podcast, that sometimes the frameworks and the things that white women provide us won't work for women of color and Black women. And that's not your fault as a white coach, but it is your responsibility to manage your feelings when you get the feedback that that's not going to work for them. And it's important for us to remember that mentorship isn't about being right. It's about holding someone's hand and walking through life with them and recognizing that the way that you do something might not be the way that they can do it or will do it, and that doesn't make it wrong. It just means that you'll have different perspectives, different experiences, and those need and deserve different methods, and that's okay. And it doesn't make you less of a coach unless you respond poorly. So
Yeah. I think ultimately, to sum it all up, is like mentorship, however you want to frame it, coaching, strategist, consulting, but truly mentorship, because that's really the aspect of all of those that is that coming up alongside a person isn't just about growth. It's about being seen and still standing tall from
yeah,
both perspectives, being able to be seen for your knowledge, but
yeah,
also being able to be seen on the flip side for, needing that support and where you're at to help you get where you want to go.
yeah.
And Brianna, I think they're ready for a heart check.
Yeah, so today's heart check is for everyone, no matter if you're a white coach, a woman of color, a Black woman, client, coach, whatever it looks like. I want you to think about, where have you wished for mentorship and what would it look like to create it for someone else? What would it look like for you to be the mentor that you need and for you to be open to mentorship from someone who doesn't look like you? And then ask yourself, what kind of mentor do you need to become, and taking some of the responsibility of this role and this situation, because it's not fair to ask people to show up and mentor you when you're not willing to do the same for somebody else in a similar situation as you. So that's something for you guys to kind of think about and like really get honest with yourself for. And then I'm really interested to see what kind of conversations or kind of things that you discover in the process.
We're three Black women and their white coach, and this is just the beginning.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us today.
We've loved getting to spend this time here with you, but don't let the conversation stop here. Drop us a message or connect with us on social media. All the details can be found in the show notes.
Along with some great resources to help you on this journey of helping make the coaching industry more inclusive. Until next time, we're 3 Black women
and their white coach,
doing the work, holding the space, and building something better.